Two carriages faced each other upon a narrow woodland road, wheels nearly touching, neither party willing to yield. The air was tense and still, save for the soft whickering of restless horses and the whisper of wind through the trees. Though it was plain to all who watched which carriage was in the wrong, the lady inside refused to concede. She was Lady Rachel Rezinon, the only daughter of His Grace, the Duke of Rezinon, one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. In truth, only the royal family themselves commanded greater influence. Lady Rachel was often called Princess Rachel, not from title but from habit. From birth, she had been adored, obeyed, and indulged. Her will was iron, wrapped in satin. She was beautiful, imperious, and accustomed to having her slightest whim treated as command. Now, her carriage stood at a stubborn halt. She leaned forward, irritation flickering in her striking green eyes. "What is the meaning of this delay?" she demanded. Her maid rushed to open the door, and Rachel stepped down with practiced grace, the hem of her lavender gown catching a shaft of the late afternoon sunlight. Her guard bowed and reported in a low, cautious tone, "Your Grace, the path we've taken is meant for those traveling in the opposite direction. Another carriage approaches from the proper side. We find ourselves at odds with them, and neither can pass." Rachel's voice sharpened. "And yet they do not move. Do they not see our ducal crest?" "They see it, Your Grace," the man replied, eyes downcast. "But they have declined to make way." "Declined?" she repeated in disbelief. "Then they must be blind, or fools." Her gaze turned toward the opposing carriage. It was a striking sight, dark, elegant, and tastefully adorned, every inch of it speaking of refinement rather than ostentation. The carriage was not gilded or encrusted with jewels like those of court ladies, but its craftsmanship was exquisite. Polished oak panels gleaming beneath the dappled sunlight, the brass fittings burnished to a deep, steady glow. The horses that drew it were magnificent creatures, tall, strong, and perfectly matched, their coats shining like liquid bronze. Flanking the carriage stood 4 mounted guards, and another that seemed more like an attendant than a soldier. It was their formation that gave Lady Rachel pause. The 2 men at the fore, whose horses stood several paces ahead, were black soldiers, broad-shouldered and impeccably dressed in dark riding uniforms trimmed with subtle silver thread. Their posture was proud, disciplined, and utterly composed, the unmistakable bearing of command. Their eyes, alert and steady, scanned the road not with deference, but with the calm authority of men who expected to be obeyed. Behind them, a step lower in rank and distance, rode 2 white soldiers in the same livery, clearly attendants or subordinates. Their placement was deliberate, no accident of arrangement. It was an order of precedence that should not have been. To Rachel, the sight was like a personal affront. In all her life, she had never seen such a thing. Men of color riding in front, leading rather than following, while their white counterparts lingered behind them in subordinate position. It was an inversion of the natural order as she had been taught it, and it unsettled her to her very core. She stayed, her lips parting in disbelief. The composure of those men, so calm, so self-assured, only deepened her irritation. There was no servility in them, no trace of the deference she expected. Instead, there was a quiet confidence, the air of those who served a master or mistress of equal strength and dignity. It was not only their placement that disturbed her, but their presence. The black soldiers wore their authority as naturally as armor, their hands steady upon the reins, their expressions unbothered by her scrutiny. They did not avert their gaze when her eyes met theirs. One even inclined his head ever so slightly, not in bowing, but in acknowledgement, an act that felt more like equality than submission. Something in Rachel recoiled. It felt as though the world itself had tilted, the social order bent out of shape. She straightened, her chin lifting. Something about this opposing party, this silent defiance, this calm command cloaked in elegance, offended every fiber of her pride. It was not only a carriage blocking her path. It was an insult to her rank, and to the world as she believed it should be. Rachel drew herself up, her tone laced with frost. "I shall not remark on the foolishness of placing your betters behind you," she said coldly, stepping forward. "Only a master of equal folly would permit such insolence. Now tell me, Who dares to obstruct the way of the Duke of Rezinon's daughter? One of the dark-skinned soldiers urged his horse forward. His expression was calm, his eyes steady. "Madam," he said evenly, "you are upon the wrong path. You must turn your carriage around, so that we may pass." Rachel gasped. Never in her life had she been addressed so. The man's bearing was noble, his tone resolute, his voice deep and clear. But it was his defiance that struck her like a slap. "Do you have 10 heads, that you speak to me so?" she snapped. "Do you not know to whom you speak? I am the daughter of His Grace the Duke of Rezinon. Tell me your master's name, and I shall see your head roll before the day is out." A quiet fell upon the road. Then, from the opposing carriage, a fair-haired lady stepped down, graceful, serene, and finely dressed. Her clothing bespoke wealth, yet Rachel did not recognize her from any noble circle. "You lowly creature," Rachel spat. "If you value your life, order your men aside at once, and deliver that insolent guard into my custody." The woman did not respond. Instead, she turned back toward the carriage and offered her hand. "I assure you, fiery miss," came a smooth, melodic voice from within, "no head shall roll, not while I am here." Rachel froze. From the carriage descended another woman, dark-skinned, radiant, her beauty almost unearthly. Her complexion glowed with warmth, her curls gleamed beneath the light. Her gown of dark blue, though seemingly plain, was made of the most expensive material that only the wealthy could afford. She moved with grace so natural, it made Rachel's own bearing feel rehearsed. Rachel, long accustomed to admiration, was momentarily robbed of words. The stranger's beauty unsettled her deeply. Her voice, steady and kind, yet commanding, only made it worse. It took Lady Rachel several moments to realize that the woman had been speaking to her. She had heard the cadence of words, soft and articulate, yet their meaning had scarcely reached her mind. She stood rooted to the spot, caught between or in something far darker, a slow, poisonous envy winding its way through her thoughts. Her gaze lingered on the stranger's face, drinking in every graceful movement, every flicker of calm assurance. In that brief silence, Rachel's imagination had already begun to weave its cruel design, a plan to humble this woman, to strip away the beauty that dared outshine her own. So lost was she in that bitter reverie that she did not at first perceive the stillness that had fallen between them. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the faint stamp of a horse's hoof. Then, the woman's voice ceased, and with elegant patience, she merely raised a brow. It was a look of quiet inquiry, composed and self-possessed, as though she had asked a question and now awaited an answer from someone far beneath her station. To Rachel, that simple gesture, so calm, so confident, felt like the sharpest insult of all. Rachel's temper flared. "You wretch, are you planning rebellion? It has not been 50 years since people of your complexion ceased to be slaves, and yet you dare challenge me, the daughter of a duke." The woman's eyes flashed, but her tone remained calm. Rachel, however, would not let her speak. "I have had enough of your insolence," she cried. "You will be arrested and brought before my father. You shall answer for this." The stranger smiled. It was a serene, knowing smile that only enraged Rachel further. "Very well," the woman said, her voice soft as silk yet carrying an authority that left no room for argument. "Since you are beyond reasoning, we shall do it the hard way. Come, Diana, help me into the carriage. We should be gone from this place within the minute." Though spoken quietly, her words rang like an order. There was no petulant drama in them, only the measured certainty of one who expected obedience. Diana, the fair-haired maid dressed with uncommon refinement, stepped forward at once and offered her hand. The sight of such a well-appointed attendant only deepened Rachel's irritation. The maid's neat coif, tasteful gown, and composed manner suggested a household of refinement rather than a mere merchant's establishment. It mocked Rachel's expectations of rank as plainly as if the maid had set a hand on the Duke's own standards. Who has a maid that looks so nobly dressed? Rachel thought, stung. Even her own maid, so dutiful, so correctly attired, appeared suddenly embittered and commonplace by comparison. What rankled most of all was the reversal of propriety, a white maid in service to a woman of dark complexion. Her mind had barely time to fester on the insult when movement broke the moment. The 4 soldiers dismounted with the silent efficiency of trained soldiers and drew their swords, the flat of the blades catching the light with a quick, bright whisper. Rachel's eyes widened as the scene unfolded with terrible swiftness. Her composure snapped like thin thread. Fury, hot and immediate, surged to her face. "You will not dare harm me," she shrieked, voice high with terror and outrage. "Do you know who I am? I am the Duke's daughter. If you touch me, your entire families will be destroyed." Her words, frantic, defiantly outraged, hung in the air. She had spoken threats before, wrapped in confidence. Now there was a rawness to them, a child's panic beneath the armor of haughtiness. The soldiers moved with calm purpose. Rachel's danger and her bewilderment had never seemed clearer. But her threats were useless. The 4 breezed past her, their movements swift and disciplined. Rachel's own guards drew their blades but were subdued within moments. Before she could even process what had occurred, her grand carriage was overturned and shoved aside. True to the woman's word, her carriage was gone within the minute, leaving Rachel standing amidst the ruin of her pride, her trembling maid, and 2 defeated guards. Rachel stood trembling, humiliated, and furious. She swore she would not rest until that woman's head rolled. By morning, vengeance was already in motion. In the great marble hall of the royal palace, the Duke of Rezinon thundered before the throne. "Your Majesty must seek justice for my child," he declared. King Samuel II of the Handel Kingdom, seated upon the gilded throne, regarded the Duke calmly. He was a man in his early 30s, handsome, thoughtful, with wavy brown hair and warm honey-brown eyes. "Well, good Duke," said the king mildly, "what misfortune has so inflamed your temper?" "Forgive me for my impertinence, Your Majesty," the Duke began, his voice carrying through the gilded throne room, "but I must lay the blame for this unrest squarely at Your Majesty's own door." A collective murmur rippled through the chamber at his audacity. The Duke's broad shoulders stiffened as his voice rose, the color climbing steadily into his cheeks. "True patriots of the kingdom," he continued, "stood firmly against your decision to marry that woman of the dark race, whose history, if I may be so bold, is most disgraceful. But Your Majesty would not listen. And now her kind rebels against their betters." His words echoed through the vaulted hall. Nobles shifted, fans stilled midair, and a dozen pairs of eyes darted between the king and his fuming subject. One of them, the Duke pressed on, presumably a merchant's daughter, attacked my child upon the road. They cut loose her fine horses, bound her guards, and overturned her carriage, all to humiliate her. The intention, Your Majesty, was nothing less than rebellion. He stopped, his chest heaving. A flush of anger burned across his face, the crimson deepening under the scrutiny of every courtier in the room. Low whispers spread among the nobles. The Duke's accusation hung heavy in the air. His dangerous words were made all the more scandalous for being spoken in the presence of the young king himself. The king's expression, however, remained perfectly composed. "And your daughter, was she harmed?" he asked. The Duke hesitated. "She was not, Your Majesty, but she was greatly distressed." "Ah," said the king, his lips curling faintly. "Then she must be a remarkable fighter indeed, to have survived such violence without injury." The Duke's color deepened. "Your Majesty, I find this no laughing matter. If such behavior goes unchecked, tomorrow it shall be our very lives at stake." The king folded his hands. "And what punishment would you propose?" "The black guards should be executed," said the Duke harshly. "The white ones imprisoned for their defiance. And as for the woman, she should serve as maid to my daughter until the girl deems her reformed." "In other words," said the king, softly but pointedly, "you would enslave her." "No, Your Majesty," sputtered the Duke, "merely discipline her." The king's brows rose. "Indeed. And where's your daughter now?" "She waits outside these doors, Your Majesty." At His Majesty's signal, Rachel entered the hall, resplendent in a gown of pale rose satin. She was, as ever, a vision, her golden hair perfectly arranged, her expression demure yet proud. The courtiers murmured in admiration. The king inquired into her account, and she, dabbing delicately at imagined tears, gave a tale even more exaggerated than her father's. She professed sleeplessness, terror, and innocence, portraying herself as the very picture of a wronged maiden. "You could have deceived me, Lady Rachel," said the king with a smile. "You appear in the best of health. Tell me, do you share your father's view on justice?" "Yes, your majesty," Rachel began, lowering her lashes in practiced humility. "It would be rightful for the head of the offender to roll for such blatant disregard of rank and open rebellion, but I am merciful. I would take her under my wings, to reform her, to teach her her place in society, as my very own maid." She curtsied delicately, doing her utmost to hide the spark of excitement that flared within her. Not only had she nearly secured her revenge, but she now stood speaking before the king himself, a man she had long admired and secretly coveted. There was a faint smile on his majesty's lips, a warmth in his gaze that Rachel eagerly believed to be admiration. Her heart fluttered with dangerous hope. Perhaps he saw in her what others had long whispered, that she, not that foreign-blooded queen, was most worthy to stand at his side. Perhaps, in time, he would come to his senses and depose the woman whom so many at court quietly despised. Her Majesty, the Queen. Rachel's inward smile froze. The color drained from her face, and a chill, like ice in her veins, swept through her body. A feeling of such overwhelming dread gripped her that for one dizzying instant she feared she might faint. His Majesty rose at once, his face alight, and extended his hand to the woman who entered. The queen moved with effortless grace, every inch a monarch born. Her dark skin gleamed in the glow of the chandeliers, her presence radiant yet commanding. The court bowed low as she crossed the marble floor, and only at the gentle wave of her hand did they dare to rise again. The king guided her to the throne beside him, his manner tender and reverent. "Your Majesty," said the queen, her voice clear and melodious, "I find this case to my liking. Perhaps you will grant it to me, that I may be the judge." She cast him a knowing look, half amused, half affectionate. He smiled broadly and inclined his head. "Whatever my queen desires, she shall have." "Your Majesty," cried the duke suddenly, his voice breaking through the hush, "that is hardly proper. Even if it were so, Her Majesty would surely judge with prejudice. It concerns one of her own." The words hung in the air like a blade unsheathed. King Samuel turned toward him slowly. The warmth had vanished from his face. The entire hall seemed to shiver under the weight of his gaze. "Duke Rezinon," he said, his tone calm but deadly, "have you grown so bold as to question my authority?" Even the duke, a man feared by all lesser nobles, stepped back involuntarily, struggling to mask the tremor in his hands. "I dare not, your Majesty," he stammered. "Forgive my impertinence." His voice cracked, betraying the fear he fought to hide. The queen's laughter, low, musical, and utterly composed, broke the tension. Now, dearest," she said, turning to her husband with a gentle smile, "the duke and his family value status above all else. He would never dream of questioning authority above his station, just as none below him would dare question his. I am certain he spoke only out of fatherly affection for his child." The king's sternness softened. He nodded. "As ever, my queen is both gracious and wise." The queen turned her gaze upon the duke, who glowered at her with barely veiled disdain. She smiled sweetly. "Speaking of fatherly affection," she said lightly, "it seems rather unaffectionate to bring your daughter here in such distress. What a terrible ordeal she must have suffered." She turned to Rachel, her eyes gentle but knowing. "What a fright you must have had, my dear. You look pale as marble." Rachel tried to speak but found no words. The king raised a brow. Strange, for only moments ago she seemed as lively as a stallion. Every eye turned toward Rachel. Indeed, all color had fled from her cheeks. She appeared as one who had seen a ghost, trembling visibly beneath the queen's calm regard. The court murmured softly, and Rachel's pulse thundered in her ears. The proud young woman who had entered with confidence now stood pale and silent. Even the duke, though puffed up with self-importance, turned to his daughter in alarm. "Rachel," he called softly at first, then again, louder, "Rachel." But she did not move, nor speak. Her wide eyes stared ahead, unfocused and full of fright. Perhaps the queen's presence has reminded her of the dreadful events of yesterday, Duke Rezinon said quickly, searching for an excuse. Look how it has shaken my poor girl. She can scarcely stand. Perhaps it is best we leave this matter for later. His words faltered to a halt as the queen's voice cut through the air, calm, measured, but commanding enough to halt the heartbeat of every soul in the room. It is most certain, she said evenly, that my presence has reminded her of the events of the previous day. Then, her tone deepened, resonant, powerful, and filled with the quiet authority that could make even the bravest man cower. Rachel Rezinon, she declared, her voice echoing through the vaulted hall. What is your offense? The sound of her name, spoken thus, struck Rachel like a physical blow. Her legs gave way beneath her, and she dropped to her knees, trembling. Your Majesty, cried the Duke, his face turning crimson. What do you mean by this? You have only just become queen, and already you use your power to suppress the people. What shall become of our kingdom if this tyranny continues? It is because of you, because of your kind, that one of the blacks dared assault my child. How can they fear their betters when the queen herself is? Father. Rachel's voice broke through his tirade, faint but desperate. Please, say no more. The Duke froze, the echo of his daughter's cry hanging in the stunned silence that followed. Her plea struck him like a revelation as sudden, horrifying understanding dawned in his eyes. King Samuel, who until then had watched in silence, now rose to his feet. The warmth that once softened his gaze was gone. His eyes burned with quiet fury. Duke Rezinon, he said, his voice cold as steel, it appears I have been too patient with you. Do you accuse the queen, your sovereign, of forming her own faction within my kingdom? You have spoken of her people more times than I care to recall. Do you dare make it a formal claim, that we may address it in full before the realm? The hall fell utterly still. All traces of humor, all civility, vanished from the king's face. He looked ready for battle. The Duke's bravado collapsed. He bowed low, trembling. Your Majesties, I would not dare. Forgive me, he said weakly, his voice a hollow shadow of its former pride. The king's reply was curt. Then let this be the last I hear of such talk, from you, or from anyone else in this court. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly as nobles bowed their heads, murmuring their assent. The king turned his gaze to his queen and inclined his head gently. Please, my love, he said, continue. The queen spoke with quiet majesty, her voice calm but resonant, her gaze steady as she regarded the trembling young woman before her. Pray tell, Miss Rezinon, she said patiently, what exactly occurred that left you so distraught? And speak truly, for honesty will serve you best now. Rachel's hands twisted together as she bowed her head, her composure dissolving under the queen's serene command. Your Majesty, she began, her voice quivering. I had taken the wrong path by mistake and came upon a carriage with no flag or crest. I thought, she hesitated, her throat tightening. I thought they were being defiant, for they did not alight their carriage when I did. Only royals are above my station, so I merely wished to teach them a lesson for their insolence. Her voice cracked as she continued. I was ignorant that it was the queen in that carriage. Had I known, I would never have dared. Please, your Majesty, grant me forgiveness. You cannot blame me for ignorance. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, the queen's calm voice filled the hall once more, smooth, but carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. If memory does not fail me, she said, I recall my royal guard informing you that you were on the wrong path. Not only that, I personally alighted from my carriage and asked whether you meant to challenge a royal procession. The queen's eyes sharpened slightly, her tone still composed. And your reply, if I recall correctly, was beyond all reason, something about my being a wretch and rebelling, was it not? A collective gasp rippled through the court. The sound of it struck Rachel like thunder. Her shoulders drooped, her lips parted in horror as the truth crashed over her like a cold tide. She had been so consumed, so blinded by her envy of the woman's beauty and her own cruel designs, that she had not even heard the most crucial words spoken to her. If the woman had truly been a merchant, Her arrogance would have been little more than an offense. But to have spoken so to the queen herself, such insolence was no longer folly. It was treason. And treason, she knew, had only one sentence. It dawned on her then that the only head that would roll for this incident was not the queen's, but her own. Her strength left her all at once. She sank heavily to the marble floor. The proud heiress, who had stood so high in her own esteem, now sat trembling before the throne, haunted by the ruin she had brought upon herself. Her thoughts blurred as despair took hold. She had seen but 23 summers, yet it seemed her life was already drawing to a close. Suddenly a loud thud beside her tore Rachel from her dark reverie. She turned and saw her father bowed upon the floor, his forehead pressed to the marble. When he lifted his head there was crimson upon it, proof that he had struck himself with desperate force. "Majesties," he cried hoarsely, springing to his feet though his limbs shook. "I beg your forgiveness on behalf of my foolish child. It is my fault that I have not raised her right. She in truth did not mean anything, and I am certain she did not know of your states, for I am certain your majesty was traveling incognito. I do not ask for much. I ask only the same mercy she was willing to show when she thought you beneath her station. Please, take her as your maid for as long as you wish. I am also willing to pay whatever fine you desire. Please, spare her, for she is my only child, my only family. She has had no motherly love since her mother died birthing her. I must have erred in the way I raised her. Please, spare her." The whole fell into a weighty silence. Never before had the proud Duke of Rezinon been seen so humbled. Never before had his voice broken with such supplication. Even those nobles most eager for spectacle fell quiet, uncertain how to respond to the spectacle of such a stern man laid low by paternal fear. One by one, the usual complainers found their courage again. Voices rose, sharp, condemning words from those who would not forgive such affronts to rank. "She is so spoiled," some declared, "that she fancies herself a queen and dared to challenge one. Such presumption deserves death for treason, or at least lifelong imprisonment." The murmurs swelled. Indignation rippled like wind across the assembly. But the queen raised her hand and, with a voice of composed authority that stilled even the loudest clamor, she spoke softly, "I accept." A ripple of astonishment ran through the court. "I shall take her as my maid," she continued, smiling with a serenity that held no cruelty. "As you wish." The Duke bowed once more, gratitude and terror mingling upon his face. "I thank you for your grace, your majesty. I only ask one thing, that you grant me a week to spend with my child before I send her to her fate." The queen regarded him with calm amusement. "You make it sound as though she is being condemned to perdition," she said. "I grant you 2 weeks. But you may rest easy, good sir. I only wish to do to her what she wished to do to me when she thought me less. I assure you that I shall give you a reformed child." The Duke bowed again, but the relief in his posture was thin and tremulous. The queen's assurance, meant to comfort, seemed only to deepen the fear in his eyes. A father suddenly aware that his child's pride might cost her everything, and that her re-education would be no mere parlor lesson. And thus began the humbling of Lady Rachel Rezinon, the proudest flower of the ducal house, now destined to kneel before the very woman she had called a wretch. Dear viewer, if you wish this story to continue, type continue in the comments below, and tell us what you think of the humbling of the Duke's daughter.